Picture this. I'm standing in my family's cattle corral with my 17-year-old son, Cody, working our annual spring branding like Reeds have done for 100 years. The sweet smell of burning hide mixed with morning coffee and honest sweat, pure Texas poetry. Then the universe decided to take a giant dump on my day. Two sheriff's cruisers come roaring up our ranch road, kicking up enough dust to choke a bull. Deputies jump out with hands on their weapons like we're running a meth lab instead of a cattle operation. Cease all operations immediately! Behind them rolls a black BMW shinier than a politician's promises. Out steps this woman clutching a clipboard like it's the Holy Grail, wearing a smile that could curdle fresh milk. This property is now under HOA jurisdiction per emergency court order. You're trespassing on community property. On my family's ranch, that we've owned since 1923. What would you do if armed officers forced you off land your family owned for 30 years? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I bet you've never heard an HOA story this batshit crazy. Let me back up and tell you how a 100-year-old cattle ranch suddenly became the target of suburban soccer moms with delusions of grandeur and the legal firepower of a small nation. My name's Dalton Reed, I'm 45 years old, and I'm what you might call stubbornly traditional. The Double R Ranch has been in my family since my great-grandfather homesteaded this land in 1923. 640 acres of hill country paradise, where the grass grows thick, the water runs clean, and until recently, neighbors minded their own damn business. We run 200 head of cattle, board horses for city folks who like to pretend they're cowboys on weekends, and my late wife Beth had built a nice little wedding venue business in our restored barn. Life was good, simple, the kind of honest work that leaves your hands permanently stained with dirt and your back aching in ways that feel like accomplishments. Then Beth died in a car accident 2 years ago, and everything went to hell in a handbasket lined with legal documents. The morning ritual became my anchor, coffee percolating in our 60-year-old kitchen, the metallic clink of spurs on hardwood floors, the rhythmic thud of hay bales hitting the truck bed, and that particular scent of leather mixed with alfalfa that says home better than any fancy candle. These sounds and smells were my meditation, reminding me why this life was worth the fight. But while I was busy grieving and trying to raise a 17-year-old son who blamed me for everything from global warming to his mother's death, the world outside our fence lines was changing faster than a tweaker's mood swings. Austin's sprawl had been creeping toward us for years, but after COVID, it turned into a full-scale invasion. Tech millionaires fleeing California discovered they could buy authentic Texas ranch experiences 45 minutes from downtown. Property values shot up like bottle rockets, and suddenly our quiet agricultural county was hotter real estate than beachfront property. Enter Veronica Ashworth. Imagine everything wrong with suburban development had a baby with a real estate license and grew up to become HOA Hitler. 48 years old, Austin real estate mogul, owner of the largest HOA management company in Central Texas, and the kind of woman who probably has her pool boy sign a non-disclosure agreement. She'd made her fortune transforming communities, which apparently meant turning working ranches into luxury subdivisions for people who wanted to live the rural lifestyle without any actual rural parts, like cattle, dust, or neighbors who knew the difference between horse manure and political promises. Her first visit came with a proposal wrapped in enough corporate buzzwords to choke a marketing department. Partnership opportunities for the Heritage Hills development going up on our neighbor's old place. 200 luxury homes starting at $800,000, complete with a golf course that would use more water than our cattle operation, and enough HOA rules to make a prison warden jealous. Think of the synergy, she said, standing in my driveway in heels that cost more than most people's truck payments, her voice carrying that particular Austin transplant accent that sounds like California had a one-night stand with fake Southern charm. Your authentic ranch experience, our affluent residents seeking genuine Texas culture. The smell of fresh bullshit was so thick I could have sold it as fertilizer. I told her thanks, but no thanks. We were doing fine as a working ranch, didn't need any synergy, and if her future residents wanted authentic Texas culture, they could start by learning that honest cow manure smells better than whatever designer perfume she was drowning in. That's when her smile shifted from partnership to, "You're gonna regret this, cowboy." 3 weeks later, a surveyor showed up claiming our fence encroached on planned development. A month after that, I got served with papers claiming our ranch operations posed a public safety threat to future Heritage Hills residents. 6 weeks ago, I discovered that somehow, mysteriously, the Double R Ranch had been included in an HOA without my knowledge, consent, or signature. That's when I knew this woman had just declared war on the wrong family. The HOA assault on our ranch started like death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one designed to bleed us dry while looking perfectly legal to anyone dumb enough to believe bureaucrats care about justice. Within a week of that mysterious HOA inclusion, I received 23 separate violation notices delivered by certified mail like Christmas presents from hell. Our cattle operations were suddenly noise violations because apparently cows mooing at sunrise violated quiet hours. The smell of honest ranch work became odor complaints that threatened property values. Even our century-old windmill was cited as an unauthorized structure not in harmony with community aesthetics. Because nothing says Texas heritage like a HOA committee deciding that windmills are ugly. Veronica's strategy was surgical in its stupidity. She'd show up for compliance inspections during the most critical ranch operations, right in the middle of feeding time during veterinary visits, when we were loading cattle for transport. Her clipboard became a weapon of mass irritation, clicking her designer pen like a nervous woodpecker while photographing everything from our barn door hinges to the way we coiled our lasso ropes. The sound of her BMW's engine purring up our gravel road became our family's air raid siren. Cody would hear it from half a mile away and come sprinting to warn me that the Wicked Witch of Suburbia was incoming for another round of manufactured outrage. But her masterpiece was convincing a judge to impound our ranch vehicles for safety inspections. Apparently, our 20-year-old Ford pickup, which had never failed an inspection and could probably survive a nuclear holocaust, posed a community safety hazard requiring evaluation by certified mechanics at $300 per day storage fees, highway robbery with a legal stamp, knowledge nugget. Agricultural vehicles operating on private property are typically exempt from residential vehicle regulations, always verify jurisdiction before allowing seizure. The financial pressure was immediate and brutal. $50,000 in HOA fines appeared overnight, like a bad rash that spreads while you sleep, late fees compounded daily, interest accumulated faster than student loan debt. The math was designed to be impossible. Even if we'd wanted to pay, the penalties increased faster than we could write checks. That's when I started fighting back with the most dangerous weapon known to bureaucrats, actual research. Turns out our county has agricultural exemptions dating back to the 1940s that specifically protect working ranches from residential zoning restrictions. The Double R Ranch was registered as an agricultural district, which meant HOA authority was about as legitimate as a $3 bill featuring Mickey Mouse. I started documenting everything, every interaction, every violation notice, every time Veronica trespassed on our property with her little camera and her attitude problem. My phone became a portable evidence collection device and our kitchen table transformed into mission control for fighting suburban fascism one documented violation at a time. Mini twist. During my research deep dive, I discovered that 6 other longtime ranchers in our county had also been mysteriously included in various HOAs without their consent or knowledge. This wasn't random harassment, it was a coordinated campaign to force agricultural land sales. My counterpunch came in the form of the Hill County Agricultural Defense Alliance. Within 2 weeks, I'd organized every affected rancher into a unified legal challenge. We pooled resources, shared attorneys, and started fighting back with the kind of coordinated resistance that made Veronica's individual harassment look like amateur hour. The community support surprised me more than finding an honest politician. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to started showing up with casseroles, legal advice, and stories about their own run-ins with HOA overreach. The local agricultural association offered legal funding. Even our congressman's office started asking pointed questions about unusual HOA formation practices affecting agricultural communities. But Veronica escalated to economic warfare. The vendor intimidation campaign was pure financial terrorism. Our feed supplier suddenly had delivery scheduling conflicts. The veterinarian who'd been treating our livestock for 15 years got threatening letters about liability issues for serving non-compliant properties. Even our bank started making nervous noises about operating loans being affected by ongoing legal disputes. The worst part was watching it affect Cody. Kids at school treated him like his family were environmental criminals. Teachers who'd known him since kindergarten suddenly looked at him with suspicion. He went from popular FFA officer to social pariah overnight, all because some real estate shark decided our family ranch was inconvenient for her profit margins. The school targeting was particularly vicious. Cody's agricultural science project, a detailed study of sustainable grazing practices, was suddenly deemed inappropriate for suburban students and excluded from state competition. That night, I found my son on the porch holding his project folder, looking like someone had kicked his dog and stolen his truck. "They're trying to erase us, aren't they, Dad?" I sat beside him, feeling the rough texture of weathered wood beneath us, listening to cattle settling for the night. The smell of hay and honest work hung in the evening air like a promise that some things were still worth fighting for. "Son, they're trying, but reedmen don't quit when the fight gets tough. We dig in deeper and hit back harder." When financial warfare didn't break us, Veronica decided to escalate to actual sabotage, because nothing says community standards like destroying a family's livelihood through criminal activity with a legal veneer. The fence cutting started 3 weeks into our legal challenge. I'd wake up to find sections of our perimeter fence sliced clean through with bolt cutters, creating gaps wide enough to drive a semi through. 50 head of cattle escaped onto County Road 214 during morning rush hour, turning the highway into the world's slowest rodeo starring very confused Angus steers. The local news ate it up like free barbecue. Irresponsible ranching practices endanger commuters. Agricultural operations threaten public safety. Every headline painted us as reckless cowboys while completely ignoring the obvious fact that fence wire doesn't cut itself in perfectly straight lines at 2 a.m. Because apparently rural journalism schools don't teach basic logic anymore. The repair costs hit us like a financial meteor. $3,400 for emergency fence repair, another $2,800 for insurance deductibles, plus liability exposure that could bankrupt 3 generations of Reed family ranching. Not to mention the humiliation of chasing our own cattle off a busy highway while commuters honked and filmed everything for their social media feeds. But here's where Veronica made her first major mistake. She got cocky and underestimated a man who'd spent 20 years troubleshooting industrial problems. My security camera system, 6 trail cameras positioned around our property perimeter, caught everything. Clear footage of figures in dark clothing approaching our fence line with tools at 2:17 a.m., the systematic cutting of fence wire in multiple locations, professional grade work designed for maximum chaos. The tool marks told a story better than any detective novel. Specific bolt cutter jaw patterns, consistent cutting angles, deliberate placement for maximum cattle escape potential. This wasn't random vandalism. It was professional sabotage with inside knowledge of our operation. Mini twist: the insurance investigator dropped a bombshell. Our ranch liability policy had been mysteriously canceled 3 days before the fence cutting incident. Someone with access to confidential financial records had timed this attack perfectly to maximize our exposure. That's when my engineering brain kicked into high gear. Insurance cancellations require specific triggers and inside information. Someone was coordinating these attacks with access to our private financial data. My counterpunch came in the form of Ruby Morrison, a retired federal prosecutor who'd moved to Hill Country for the quiet life and was bored out of her mind until our case landed on her desk like an early Christmas present. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, organized harassment, privacy violations. This has federal crime written all over it, Ruby said, her eyes lighting up like she'd just found a $20 bill in an old coat pocket. If they're accessing your financial records without authorization, we're looking at FBI territory. Knowledge nugget. Insurance companies can't cancel policies without specific cause and proper notification. Always verify cancellation legitimacy and document timing of suspicious incidents. Ruby's investigation uncovered a pattern uglier than a mud fence. The water rights attack came next, claiming our century-old ranch violated community conservation standards that had been invented approximately 5 minutes before Veronica filed the complaint. Never mind that we had water rights dating back to 1923 or that we used less water per acre than the golf course planned for Heritage Hills. Facts were apparently optional when you had enough money to hire lawyers who specialized in creative legal fiction. The school board targeting was pure evil wrapped in educational policy. Cody's agricultural classes were being restructured for STEM initiatives, eliminating hands-on farming education. His FFA chapter lost funding because agricultural projects weren't academically rigorous enough for college-bound suburban kids. They were systematically erasing agricultural education to make room for children who thought food originated in grocery stores and cattle were just large, smelly pets. The final straw was our wedding venue business, Beth's legacy, and our financial lifeline. Brides who'd booked our restored barn started receiving anonymous calls about ongoing legal troubles and potential safety issues at our property. 6 months of bookings canceled in 2 weeks. $28,000 in lost revenue vanishing faster than free beer at a county fair. That night, I sat in Beth's old office surrounded by her wedding planning files, breathing in the faint lavender scent that still clung to her desk drawers, feeling the crushing weight of everything we were losing to one woman's greed disguised as community improvement. The texture of her handwritten notes under my fingertips, the soft scratch of pages turning in planning binders she'd organized with military precision. Every detail reminded me what we were really fighting for. Cody found me there at midnight, brought coffee in Beth's favorite mug, and sat down without saying anything. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in comfortable silence between people who understand loss. "We're not quitting, are we, Dad?" I looked at my son, 17 years old, facing down a corrupt system with more courage than most adults possess, and felt something shift inside me from defensive to offensive. "Hell no, son, we're done playing defense. Time to take this fight to them." When sabotage didn't break us, Veronica decided to go nuclear with a media campaign that would make North Korean propaganda look subtle and fair-balanced. She hired a public relations firm from Austin, the kind of slick operators who could make a serial killer look like a misunderstood philanthropist with unfortunate hobbies. Suddenly, coordinated social media posts appeared across every platform, painting our century-old ranch as an anachronistic obstacle to progress, threatening modern community development. The Nextdoor app became ground zero for manufactured outrage. Anonymous accounts with generic names like Concern Neighbor 2024 and Safety Community First posted daily about our unsafe agricultural practices. These accounts had been created within days of each other, all using identical language patterns that screamed professional coordination. Because nothing says grassroots community concern like a dozen fake accounts posting the same talking points every 4 hours like clockwork. The political lobbying was surgical in its corruption. Campaign contribution records showed Veronica's development company had donated maximum legal amounts to every county commissioner just weeks before our dispute began. Suddenly, officials who'd supported agricultural interests for decades started preaching about modernization and responsible land use planning. The emergency county commission meeting was called with exactly 24 hours' notice, right in the middle of harvest season when every legitimate rancher would be busy with actual work instead of political theater. The agenda was simple: rezone our property from agricultural to transitional residential, eliminating our exemptions and establishing full HOA authority. Mini twist: Ruby Morrison's investigation revealed that meeting notices were deliberately sent to incorrect addresses for agricultural community members, while Heritage Hills residents received personal phone calls and email reminders about protecting their investment. My counterpunch came in the form of old-fashioned community organizing with modern efficiency. If Veronica wanted dirty politics, she'd pick the wrong engineer to outsmart and the wrong community to underestimate. Within 18 hours, I'd mobilized 47 ranching families through group texts, social media, and the kind of phone tree network that rural communities perfected before the internet existed. We flooded that commission meeting with enough angry ranchers wearing their best hats and grimmest expressions to make it look like a cattle auction with better vocabulary and stronger opinions about government overreach. The smell of honest work, leather, hay, and determination filled that meeting room like incense in a church dedicated to property rights. The environmental reversal was beautiful in its timing. The EPA investigation that Veronica had triggered with anonymous complaints came back with results that made her look like a complete fool. Our ranch exceeded all environmental standards and was cited as a model of sustainable agricultural practices with environmental impact far lower than the proposed luxury development. Federal investigators particularly enjoyed documenting how our century-old conservation practices protected water quality, while Heritage Hills plans would create runoff issues affecting 3 downstream communities. But the real game changer was the whistleblower. Jenny Chen worked inside Veronica's HOA management company, documenting systematic fraud while waiting for the right moment to come forward. When Ruby offered FBI protection and immunity deals, Jenny delivered internal documents that made Watergate look like a parking ticket. Email chains discussing problem property acquisition strategies, financial records showing kickback arrangements between HOA management and development companies, internal memos about managing resistance from traditional residents through compliance pressure and legal harassment. The evidence revealed a statewide pattern: private equity firms funding development companies to systematically acquire ranch properties through manufactured HOA schemes. Knowledge nugget: HOA management companies must maintain transparent financial records and follow fiduciary duty standards. Internal corruption can trigger federal racketeering charges. Veronica's desperation reached comic book villain levels with direct threats. Anonymous midnight phone calls warning about accidents that could happen to families who refused to cooperate. Letters suggesting Cody's college agricultural scholarships might be affected by our reputation issues. She contacted my former consulting clients, spreading rumors about my legal troubles and unstable mental state. 3 clients canceled contracts within a week, costing us $12,000 in lost income. The breaking point came when someone, and we all knew exactly who, called Child Protective Services with anonymous reports about Cody living in an unsafe environment due to our legal disputes and my demonstrated inability to maintain safe property conditions. A CPS investigator showed up during dinner, the sound of her government-issued sedan crunching on our gravel driveway like nails on a chalkboard. She forced my 17-year-old son to answer questions about whether he felt safe living with his father while I sat helplessly in the next room, listening to every word and feeling my blood pressure climb towards stroke territory. For 30 minutes, this stranger interrogated my kid about our family stability while Veronica's manufactured crisis played out exactly as she'd planned. The texture of our kitchen table under my clenched fists, the taste of suppressed rage, the sound of my son's voice staying steady despite obvious stress. Every detail burned into my memory as evidence of how far these people would go to steal our land. That night, sitting on our porch listening to cattle settling down for the evening, Cody looked at me with exhausted wisdom no teenager should possess. "They're really trying to destroy us, aren't they, Dad?" I nodded, breathing in the honest scent of hay and home. "Yes, son, but they just made their biggest mistake. Now it's personal." The internal documents that Jenny Chen delivered to Ruby Morrison hit our kitchen table like a roadmap to hell, complete with detailed directions and a timeline for destroying every family ranch in Central Texas. What we'd thought was just Veronica being a power-hungry HOA tyrant turned out to be something much bigger and infinitely more sinister. The emails read like a criminal conspiracy manual written by people too arrogant to use code words or too stupid to realize that federal prosecutors love cases with written evidence. Phase 2 property acquisition targets identified, read one email from Veronica to someone named Marcus Steele at Lone Star Development Partners. Reed Ranch presents optimal profit potential due to highway frontage and water access. Recommend accelerated compliance pressure timeline. Accelerated compliance pressure. They had an actual corporate term for systematically destroying families. I've heard more compassionate language in IRS audit letters. The financial web was uglier than a 3-legged dog and twice as vicious. Lone Star Development Partners was backed by Heritage Investment Fund, a private equity vulture from New York that specialized in rural property transformation opportunities. Translation: they bought beautiful family ranches, bulldozed everything that made them special, and turned them into suburbs for people who wanted to live the country lifestyle without any actual country, livestock, or mud on their designer boots. Veronica's HOA management company received a percentage of every forced property sale, plus bonuses for accelerated acquisition timelines. The faster she could drive families off their land, the bigger her payday. Our suffering was literally line items in her profit and loss statements. The smell of corruption was so thick in those documents you could practically taste it, like the metallic tang of fear mixed with the stench of greed that comes from people who've never worked an honest day in their lives. But here's where it got really ugly. The email chain showed a target list of 17 properties across 3 counties, all working ranches that had been in families for generations. Our Double R Ranch was just number 6 on a systematic land grab scheme that had been operating for 2 years with military precision and zero moral compass. Knowledge nugget: property owners can't be forced into HOAs without explicit written consent verified through proper legal channels. Forged signatures void entire formations and create federal fraud liability. The document fraud was more extensive than a politician's campaign promises. Every single ranch on their target list had been included in HOAs through forged consent documents. The same notary, Patricia Williams, who worked for a title company owned by Lone Star Development, had verified dozens of signatures for people who'd never signed anything except maybe their own death warrants by trusting the system. Ruby Morrison's forensic analysis revealed fraud so obvious it was insulting to anyone with functioning brain cells. All the forged signatures were created by the same person using tracing techniques on legitimate documents obtained from county records. Some people were supposedly signing HOA agreements while they were documentably in hospitals, out of state, or attending funerals. The political corruption ran deeper than a West Texas oil well during a drought. Campaign contribution records showed Heritage Investment Fund had purchased local politicians across 5 counties through shell companies with names like Community Development Initiative and Rural Progress Alliance. County commissioners, planning board members, even some judges had received consulting fees from companies that existed only on paper but were funded by the same New York vultures trying to steal our land. But the smoking gun made my blood run colder than a January morning without coffee. Veronica's email to her handler: read family showing unexpected resistance, recommend escalation to Phase 3 pressure tactics including CPS intervention and professional reputation destruction, target completion within 60 days to meet Q4 acquisition deadlines. They had planned my son's trauma, scheduled it like a quarterly business review. Ruby Morrison looked at me across our kitchen table covered with evidence, her eyes gleaming with the kind of predatory satisfaction that made federal prosecutors legendary. Dalton, they just handed us everything we need to destroy their entire criminal enterprise and send them to federal prison for the next decade. Game over, Veronica. Time to learn what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong Texas family. Our kitchen transformed into something that looked like a cross between a federal task force command center and a county fair planning committee, if county fairs involved taking down organized crime and the committee members carried firearms and law degrees. Ruby Morrison brought in reinforcements that would make the Avengers jealous. Her former colleague from the FBI's white-collar crime unit, Agent Sarah Martinez, took one look at our evidence and practically purred like a cat who'd found a warehouse full of tuna fish. 20 years in federal law enforcement, and I've never seen criminals this sloppy, Agent Martinez said, spreading financial records across our dining room table like she was dealing cards for the world's most expensive poker game. They documented their own corruption better than most people document their tax returns. It's like they wanted to get caught, prosecuted, and sent to federal prison with matching orange jumpsuits. The legal strategy assembly was beautiful in its lethal precision. Ruby's network included a federal prosecutor who specialized in RICO cases and collected convictions like some people collect vintage wine, an environmental attorney who understood agricultural protection laws better than most farmers understood their own land rights, and a forensic accountant who could trace money laundering schemes through shell companies faster than a bloodhound tracking a bacon-wrapped rabbit. Knowledge nugget: federal RICO charges apply when organizations engage in ongoing criminal enterprises, document patterns of fraud, conspiracy, and financial crimes to trigger mandatory federal prosecution. The community coalition building was where this whole thing shifted from defensive survival to offensive warfare with superior firepower and home field advantage. Within a week, I'd organized every affected ranching family into the Hill Country Agricultural Defense Alliance, a legal entity with its own attorneys, investigators, and enough pooled resources to fight corporate corruption on equal financial terms. 47 ranching families contributed to a legal defense fund that reached $380,000 in 10 days. These weren't wealthy people. Most of us measured net worth in cattle and land rather than stock portfolios. But we understood that if we didn't stop this land grab scheme here, every working ranch in central Texas would be bulldozed for developments with names like Heritage Hills, where the only heritage was systematic theft and the only hills were piles of bulldozed family dreams. The technical preparation was where my engineering background finally paid dividends bigger than Microsoft stock in 1986. I'd spent 30 years solving complex industrial problems by breaking them into manageable components, and systematic criminal conspiracy was just another engineering challenge with higher stakes and federal prison sentences for failure. Environmental documentation proved our ranch exceeded every federal standard for water quality, soil conservation, and wildlife habitat preservation. Professional surveys confirmed no boundary encroachment issues. Historical research documented our water rights, agricultural exemptions, and century of environmental stewardship that made us look like conservation saints compared to golf course developers. Knowledge nugget: agricultural properties typically qualify for special zoning protections and tax exemptions. Research your state's agricultural district designations before accepting any residential development authority. The Ally Network expanded faster than bad news in a small town. Judge Samuel Hartwell, retired county judge with 40 years of experience fighting corruption, provided historical context about development company tactics that made our current situation look like amateur hour compared to schemes he'd seen before. Dr. Elena Vasquez, environmental scientist from UT, documented our conservation practices for federal protection programs that would make our ranch untouchable by future development vultures. Travis Coleman, investigative journalist with agricultural background and political connections that reached all the way to the governor's mansion, coordinated media strategy that would make Veronica's expensive public relations firm look like high school newspaper editors with delusions of competence. The intelligence gathering revealed corruption so systematic it belonged in a criminal justice textbook. Ruby's forensic accountant traced money flows between Heritage Investment Fund, Lone Star Development, various shell companies, and political campaigns across 5 counties like following a roadmap drawn in blood money and voter fraud. Corporate investigation showed Heritage Investment Fund operated similar schemes in 12 states, always targeting agricultural communities with aging populations, financial pressure, and limited political influence. We weren't their first victims, but by God, we were going to be their last if I had anything to say about it. The family preparation was the hardest part. You can install security cameras and hire attorneys, but you can't really prepare a 17-year-old for the possibility that his father might testify in federal court against organized criminals who'd already demonstrated willingness to destroy families for profit margins. Cody handled it better than I did, honestly. The sound of him practicing testimony answers in his bedroom, the sight of him organizing evidence files with the same methodical precision his mother had brought to wedding planning, the smell of determination mixed with teenage anxiety. Every detail reminded me that this fight was about his future as much as our past. "Dad, they messed with the wrong family," he said one evening while reviewing legal documents by lamplight, cattle sounds filtering through kitchen windows like a soundtrack to honest living. Mom always said Reed men don't back down from bullies, no matter how much money they have or how many lawyers they hire. Time to show these corporate vultures what Texas justice looked like when ordinary families refused to quit. When federal agents started asking uncomfortable questions about Heritage Investment Fund's business practices, Veronica shifted from arrogant suburban dictator to cornered criminal faster than a politician changing positions during election season. Her first move was hiring enough white-collar criminal defense attorneys to populate a small law school specializing in how to avoid federal prison for dummies. Marcus Steinberg charged $1,200 an hour and had the kind of reputation that made federal prosecutors simultaneously break out in nervous sweats and career advancement fantasies. But Veronica's panic was showing like a slip beneath a fancy dress at a church social. The HOA management company offices suffered a mysterious electrical fire that destroyed 18 months of financial records, computer hard drives, and backup systems, with the suspicious timing of a politician's memory during congressional testimony. The smell of burned electronics and desperation hung over the crime scene like incense at a funeral for common sense. Mini twist: FBI computer forensics recovered everything from supposedly destroyed servers, plus discovered Veronica had been secretly recording phone conversations with her co-conspirators as insurance against betrayal, evidence that would destroy her entire criminal network. The evidence destruction was almost comical in its obviousness. Computer forensics experts don't just disappear when you need them. They multiply like rabbits and get very excited about recovering deleted files from systems that criminals thought were wiped cleaner than a whistle at a dog show. My ranch security became a bigger production than a Hollywood action movie. Motion sensors, trail cameras, perimeter alarms, and enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous. The constant electronic beeps and camera clicks mixed with traditional ranch sounds like some weird technological symphony played in the key of paranoid but completely justified. The sabotage escalated to pure psychological warfare designed to break us financially and emotionally. Our cattle water troughs were contaminated with antifreeze, requiring emergency veterinary intervention that cost $8,400 and nearly killed 12 head of prime breeding stock. The metallic taste of fear mixed with the acrid smell of chemical contamination as we watched our animals suffer for someone else's greed. Equipment destruction became a weekly ritual of expensive vandalism: tractors with sugar and gas tanks, hydraulic lines cut on hay balers, diesel fuel contaminated with water in storage tanks. Each act of sabotage generated repair bills that mounted like campaign debt, but also created more evidence for federal prosecutors building a case that would make organized crime families nervous. Veronica contacted my former consulting clients, spreading rumors about my legal troubles and unstable mental state. 3 clients canceled contracts within a week, costing us $12,000 and forcing me to consider liquidating cattle to cover mounting legal expenses. But her desperation reached peak stupidity with the bribery attempt that would make federal prosecutors everywhere weep tears of prosecutorial joy. She showed up at our ranch on a Tuesday morning looking like she'd slept in her BMW, makeup smeared, designer outfit wrinkled, that Botoxed face twisted into something resembling human desperation instead of professional vindictiveness. For the first time since this nightmare started, she looked genuinely scared rather than just angry. "Dalton, we need to reach an understanding," she said, clutching a briefcase like it contained either the crown jewels or her last hope of avoiding federal prison. "This situation has gotten completely out of hand." What Veronica didn't know was that FBI agent Martinez had already approached me about wearing a recording device. Federal agents love nothing more than catching criminals in the act of digging their graves deeper while providing legally admissible evidence of additional felonies. The recording equipment taped to my chest was smaller than a matchbook and more sensitive than a teenage poet's feelings about unrequited love. Every word, every nervous breath, every incriminating syllable was being preserved for posterity and federal prosecution. "I'm prepared to offer you $3.5 million, Veronica said, opening the briefcase to reveal stacks of cash that looked like movie props but smelled like real desperation. "Cash money, no questions asked. All you have to do is sign a confidentiality agreement and find somewhere else to enjoy your retirement." The woman was literally trying to buy my silence with suitcases full of money, while federal agents listened in real time through equipment so sophisticated it could probably detect her heart rate accelerating from fear and criminal stupidity. "That's generous," I replied. playing my part like an actor who understood that one good performance could send criminals to federal prison for decades. But what about the environmental violations, the water contamination? What violations? She laughed, the sound like fingernails on a chalkboard mixed with the death rattle of a dying criminal enterprise. A few dead fish, some water quality concerns? That's just nature, Dalton. Things die, ecosystems change. It's not our responsibility if people are too sensitive about natural environmental cycles. She'd just confessed to knowing about environmental crimes while offering bribes to cover them up on federal recording equipment, with agents monitoring who probably high-fived each other hard enough to leave bruises. That evening, sitting on our porch with Cody, listening to the peaceful sound of cattle settling down while federal agents processed evidence that would destroy our enemies, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. The sweet taste of incoming justice, served Texas-style with a side of federal prosecution. Federal pressure intensified like a Texas thunderstorm in August. You could feel the electricity building in the air, smell the ozone of incoming justice, and hear the distant rumble of prosecution thunder rolling across hill country toward Heritage Investment Fund's criminal empire. Grand jury indictments landed on Veronica's doorstep like lightning strikes, each carrying federal felony charges that could send her to prison longer than most people's mortgage terms. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, environmental crimes, and my personal favorite, attempting to bribe a federal witness while under active investigation. Because apparently some people graduated from criminal mastermind school with degrees in how to make everything infinitely worse. The asset forfeiture was beautiful in its thoroughness. Government agents seized properties, bank accounts, luxury vehicles, and investment portfolios connected to the criminal enterprise faster than vultures descending on roadkill during drought season. Veronica's BMW, her Austin mansion, even her designer handbag collection became evidence in a federal case that prosecutors were already calling career-defining material. But cornered criminals don't surrender gracefully. They usually double down on stupid and make their legal situations exponentially worse through panicked decision-making and desperate criminal activity that would make mob lawyers weep with frustration. Mini twist: federal wiretaps intercepted the unthinkable. Veronica had contacted cartel connections from her pharmaceutical distribution days, trying to hire actual criminals to permanently resolve the Reed problem through violence that would make her previous crimes look like jaywalking violations. The FBI response was swift and decisive. Agent Martinez called me personally with updates that sounded like prosecutor Christmas morning. Dalton, she just graduated from white-collar criminal to potential domestic terrorist. We're talking federal conspiracy charges that carry life sentences without possibility of parole. The gravity hit me like a physical blow. This woman had been willing to have my family killed over a property dispute. The metallic taste of fear mixed with rage as I realized how close we'd come to something unspeakable. The community mobilization reached fever pitch as word spread through ranching networks across central Texas. Our courthouse rally grew from local support to regional movement to national attention faster than wildfire in drought conditions. The sound of pickup trucks arriving from 3 counties, diesel engines mixing with righteous conversation, created a symphony of rural solidarity that could probably be heard in Austin. 500 supporters gathered at courthouse steps, creating an atmosphere electric with the kind of civic engagement that makes politicians nervous and corrupt officials consider immediate career changes or flights to non-extradition countries. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with honest sweat and determination as families who'd driven hours to support our fight spread picnic blankets and prepared for a day of democratic justice. National television crews transformed our quiet county courthouse into something resembling a presidential campaign stop. Satellite trucks lined Main Street, generators hummed constantly, and reporters practiced opening lines that would carry our story across America. The cacophony of media equipment mixed with crowd conversations created background noise that sounded like democracy in action. Cody stood beside me on the courthouse steps, watching the controlled chaos with wide eyes that held equal parts amazement and pride. "Dad, did we really do all this?" "No, son. We just refused to quit when bullies tried to steal our home." Everything else was just good people standing up for what's right. Veronica's final public appearance was a masterclass in criminal self-destruction. Against her attorney's desperate advice, she showed up with a megaphone and enough manufactured outrage to power a small city, determined to control the narrative through sheer volume and delusional righteousness. "This is a witch hunt!" she screamed to anyone within earshot, including federal agents, news cameras, and 500 people who'd gathered specifically to witness her downfall. "Environmental extremists and backwards ranchers are destroying economic progress." The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast and serve it at Sunday dinner. A woman facing federal charges for environmental crimes was calling environmentalists extremists while standing on courthouse steps surrounded by evidence of her own criminal conspiracy. The political bombshell dropped when FBI agents arrested County Commissioner Bradley Morrison during live television coverage. The sight of an elected official being led away in handcuffs while cameras captured every humiliating moment sent shockwaves through the crowd and probably through every corrupt politician within a 100-mile radius. Two more commissioners resigned within hours. The county planning board dissolved overnight. Local bank officials started cooperation agreements with federal prosecutors faster than teenagers confessing curfew violations when caught red-handed. But the most satisfying moment came when federal agents approached Veronica mid-rant about government overreach. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, environmental crimes, and solicitation of violence," Agent Martinez announced with professional satisfaction that made 20 years of law enforcement worthwhile. "You have the right to remain silent," which would have been excellent advice about 30 minutes ago. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut while 500 witnesses erupted in cheers was sweeter than Sunday church bells announcing the arrival of justice in Hill County, Texas. Some battles are worth fighting, even when the enemy has more money, more lawyers, and fewer morals than a campaign fundraiser. The Hill County Courthouse had never seen anything like it. 500 people packed the steps, lawn, and surrounding streets like the world's most righteous tailgate party, complete with barbecue smokers, folding chairs, and enough concentrated fury to power the entire county grid for a month. Media trucks lined Main Street bumper to bumper. Satellite dishes pointed skyward like technological flowers reaching for the sun of national attention. The hum of generators mixed with excited conversation, the occasional moo from cattle trailers, and the distant sound of justice sharpening its claws. I stood at the makeshift podium looking out at faces that told the story of rural America, weathered hands that knew honest work, eyes that had seen struggle and triumph, families who understood that some fights are worth having even when the enemy has more money than God and fewer morals than a campaign fundraiser. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with morning coffee and righteous determination hung in the air like incense at a church service dedicated to property rights and criminal accountability. 6 months ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the crowd and across live television feeds that would make this story national news. My family thought our biggest problem was learning to live without my wife Beth and keep our ranch running. We had no idea that a criminal conspiracy was targeting every working ranch in Central Texas for systematic theft disguised as community development. Cody stood beside me, 17 years old and proud as his mother would have been, watching his father address a crowd that had gathered to witness democracy in action and criminals getting their comeuppance with federal efficiency. The crowd murmured like angry bees when I displayed evidence that had taken months to compile and federal investigators to verify. Forged documents, financial fraud, environmental violations, and conspiracy charges that read like a criminal law textbook written by people too arrogant to use proper code words. "This is what organized crime looks like in the 21st century," I continued, clicking through slides showing the systematic nature of their operation. "Not guys in pinstripe suits running gambling operations, but real estate developers in designer clothes running HOA schemes to steal family land through manufactured legal harassment and environmental terrorism. Because apparently modern criminals prefer clipboards to Tommy guns, but the theft is just as real and the victims just as devastated." A cheer went up when I displayed Veronica's federal booking photo alongside charges that would keep her in prison until her Botox wore off and her criminal empire became a case study in law school textbooks about federal prosecution success stories. But the real drama started when a black BMW pulled up behind the media trucks like a horror movie sequel that nobody wanted, but everyone was going to watch anyway. Veronica Ashworth emerged wearing oversized sunglasses and the kind of determined expression that suggested complete detachment from reality or spectacular stupidity in front of 500 witnesses and enough television cameras to document every moment of her final public meltdown. Her attorney, Marcus Steinberg, followed behind with the resigned expression of someone watching a client commit professional suicide in high definition while billing $200 an hour to witness the spectacle. "This is a sham proceeding." Veronica's voice cut throughout the crowd like fingernails on a chalkboard mixed with the death rattle of a dying criminal enterprise. Environmental extremists and backwards ranchers are destroying legitimate economic development. The crowd's response was immediate and deafening. 500 voices raised in unified disagreement created a wall of sound that probably registered on seismic equipment and definitely registered on every news microphone within a quarter-mile radius. The mic drop moment came when FBI agent Martinez stepped forward with federal arrest warrants and enough backup agents to handle a small invasion or one very desperate criminal with cartel connections. "Ms. Ashworth," Agent Martinez announced, her voice carrying the authority of federal law enforcement and the satisfaction of 20 years building airtight cases against organized criminals. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, environmental crimes, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. When corporations try to steal family ranches through fraud and violence, they've picked the wrong damn fight in Texas." The crowd erupted like a football stadium when the home team scores the winning touchdown in overtime. Cameras flashed like lightning as federal agents placed handcuffs on a woman who'd thought money and political connections made her untouchable by consequences, accountability, or basic human decency. The simultaneous arrest of County Commissioner Bradley Morrison during live television coverage was the cherry on top of a Justice Sunday served Texas style. Watching an elected official led away in handcuffs, while news cameras captured every humiliating moment, sent shockwaves through the political establishment and probably caused emergency shredding sessions in corrupt offices across multiple counties. Standing on those courthouse steps, watching federal agents process criminals who'd threatened my family while 500 supporters cheered and my son stood proudly beside me, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Beth died. The unshakable conviction that sometimes, in America, ordinary families can still defeat systematic corruption when they refuse to quit fighting for what's right. Justice in Texas tastes sweeter than homemade peach cobbler and hits harder than a freight train loaded with karma. 2 years later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's weathered porch, watching the sunrise paint the hill country in shades of golden redemption, sipping coffee from Beth's favorite ceramic mug while reading the morning paper with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from watching criminals get exactly what they deserve. The headline still makes me grin like a kid finding $20 in an old coat pocket. Federal judge sentences HOA fraud ringleader to 12 years, orders $4.7 million restitution to Texas ranching families. Veronica Ashworth was currently enjoying federal hospitality at FCI Bastrop, where her accommodations probably had better Wi-Fi than most rural areas, but significantly fewer opportunities for real estate fraud, designer shopping, or terrorizing honest families through manufactured legal harassment. 12 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments that would keep her broker than a small-town church until Social Security kicked in. The woman who tried to steal our century-old ranch was now making license plates and learning that orange jumpsuits don't come in designer cuts. Because karma, it turns out, has an excellent sense of humor and federal enforcement authority. The criminal sentences read like a prosecutor's Christmas wish list. Heritage Investment Fund executives received 8 to 15 years each. County Commissioner Morrison got 6 years for bribery and conspiracy. Even the notary who'd forged our signatures received 18 months, proving that crime doesn't pay and stupidity costs extra in federal court. The civil damages were comprehensive and devastating to our former enemies. Our family received $1.8 million for harassment, property destruction, and lost income. The Double R Ranch was now debt-free, modernized, and protected by permanent agricultural conservation easements that would prevent future development vultures from circling our family land like corporate buzzards. But the real victory was what we'd built from the ashes of their criminal conspiracy. The Beth Reed Agricultural Education Center occupied the restored barn where my wife had once planned weddings for young couples, starting their lives together. The scent of fresh hay mixed with the sound of children learning about sustainable farming, creating an atmosphere that would have made Beth cry happy tears. Now it hosted ranching workshops, environmental education, and leadership training for rural communities facing development pressure. Knowledge nugget: agricultural conservation easements provide permanent tax benefits while protecting working farms from development pressure. Consult Agricultural Extension Services for program eligibility and financial incentives. Cody graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to Texas A&M's Agricultural Engineering program. His senior project on HOA fraud schemes had been published in the Journal of Agricultural Law and was being used by law schools as a case study in property rights protection. My pride in that kid could power the entire Hill Country for a decade. The Hill Country Agricultural Defense Alliance had grown into a statewide organization with legal resources, political influence, and enough membership to make corrupt developers consider honest careers in used car sales. We'd protected 43 ranching operations, saved over 60,000 acres of agricultural land, and created legal precedents that would shield rural communities for generations. Ruby Morrison had become more than our attorney. She'd become family. Her retirement from federal prosecution lasted exactly 18 months before she'd opened a practice specializing in agricultural protection law. Romance wasn't something I'd expected at 47, but life surprises you when you're busy fighting for what matters. Ruby understood loss, honest work, and the satisfaction of seeing justice delivered with federal efficiency. Beth would have loved her. Hell, Beth probably orchestrated this whole thing from wherever good wives go to watch their stubborn husbands figure out how to be happy again. The Texas Agricultural Protection Act passed with unanimous support, creating severe penalties for development company fraud and strengthening property rights for working farms. Governor Abbott signed it into law right here on our ranch, surrounded by families we'd helped protect and land we'd fought to preserve. Our annual Hill Country Agricultural Heritage Festival now draws 5,000 visitors celebrating farming traditions, environmental conservation, and the victory of ordinary families over organized crime. The texture of genuine community, calloused hands shaking, children laughing while learning about cattle, the taste of barbecue from ranches still operating because we'd refused to quit, created memories that would last generations. The courthouse steps where we'd watched federal agents arrest criminals now hosted bluegrass concerts and political speeches about protecting rural America. Same location, completely different energy, justice served with Texas hospitality and a side of live music. Pipeline companies are already eyeing our agricultural districts for forced easements, but that's next year's battle. Some fights are worth having when you're protecting something that matters more than corporate profit margins. Drop a comment with your own HOA nightmare story. Let's keep protecting property rights together. And if you want to see more victories against corporate bullies, hit that subscribe button. Because in America, ordinary families can still defeat systematic corruption when they refuse to quit fighting for home, heritage, and what's right.